AI automation for founders tutorials. Let's be real, it's very easy to feel behind with how quickly AI is moving, but most founders aren't implementing automation in a way that actually solves a constraint. In this video, I'll show you how to actually implement AI automation in a way that solves real issues in your business. My name is Scott Bartnick. I'm a 2x Inc. 5000 CEO, and I've taught hundreds of people how to implement systems into their business. Let's jump right in. So in step one, I've already hinted at this, but we really need to focus on solving the constraint in our business. And that's simply just, what is the needy part of your business? Where are you losing money? Where are you potentially losing revenue? You got to figure out what's taking up time. One of the easiest ways to do this is just using a simple time study. You can do this for yourself or for your team and figure out where their time is going, where we're losing clients, and figure out how to identify this needy piece. Now, it sounds silly, but this is really the biggest problem. If you're just simply using AI to automate a chatbot or to answer a question or two, you're not really building systems around your constraints. And that's what I want to teach you how to do. So the next thing is, once you have an idea of where you want to solve a constraint in your business, you need to ask yourself a few simple questions. And I'm going to run through this very quickly. But the first question is, will this increase revenue? Will this increase lifetime value? Will this reduce risk in my business? Or will it recapture time for me to then utilize my time somewhere else and grow the business? If the answer is no to any of those, you do not have the right constraint and you need to go back. Now, if the answer is yes, you have to ask yourself one more question. Is this worth doing? And in the simple sense, if it's going to take you 6 months to develop something and test it, where you could have hired a VA for $800 a month or $1,000 a month, it might not be worth doing it. And the cost of implementation might be too expensive to get right. So once you have a yes to it's going to increase revenue or lifetime value, and it's worth the time and money you're going to invest in getting this done, then you have a problem worth solving. Now, in step 3, we need to understand what a system really is as we implement that into AI automation, into agents. Now, this works the same way as if I was going to hire a new team member or a virtual assistant. I want to understand the scope of what they're doing. So we build out a standard operating procedure. Now, with any system, what we're going to do is have an input. And a lot of times I speak with service-based businesses, that is just an order. Someone comes in and they place an order. Then the team needs to actually do the work. Some system needs to do the work. We have to deliver the work somehow, and then we get feedback on that work so the system gets smarter. Now, the feedback is a big piece of the system that is typically missing. So let's use a real example of this. Let's just use a service-based business and a client is coming on board and they've already paid and they need to do an onboarding form. So once they do that onboarding form for most of my businesses triggers a lot of things to happen in the background. So that is the input. The input really isn't the order. In this case, it's them doing the onboarding form. So that's your input. We're taking in the onboarding information. They're signing the terms of service. They're giving background about the company. Then that input triggers work to be done. Now that work is deliver the service, come up with a strategy plan, whatever it is. And then we have to deliver that. So let's just say in this example, the work is develop a really rich strategy plan and prepare for an onboarding call where we go over it and learn more and figure out how to adjust it so we can actually implement the strategy that they need. So the delivery for this is probably either a completed onboarding form or the actual onboarding call. And then what we do is we then revise the plan based on the feedback from that call, and then we send it to the client for approval. And again, they give feedback and we adjust if needed before they sign off on it. Now, the reason why this is so important in understanding this is to build out an automated system to replace as much of that as possible. We need to understand the steps and the full circle of this, from input to feedback and around again. Ideally, you're automating things that you already know how to do. You build out this standard operating procedure if you don't have one already, which is just documenting every step of the way, what tools, what access is needed. And then you're going to use that in AI. So you're going to hand that to AI and say, hey, how do we build this? So it's really, really simple. And the barrier to entry to actually building these agents and even agentic agents is becoming easier and easier. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. I just want to get you thinking about real world examples so that we're not being so theoretical. Now, once we document it, I do have samples of standard operating procedures down below, which you can grab for free. I also have one specifically designed for building AI agents where it asks specific questions about tools and goals, but really want to understand everything we would do if we were going to hire an employee. We want to document that same way we're going to treat this AI as an employee, including the why and the goals behind it. Now, really one of the key things here is understanding that your first AI agent or automation is probably going to be a first draft. And ideally, what you need is a human in the loop. Now, the human in the loop gives feedback and improves the system until it gets to a point that it's running on its own. Now, I'm going to show you strategies where you can get this running quicker and you get it to learn by every single decision. And that is the power that turns it from an AI workflow into an agentic AI agent that's actually more like an employee or an assistant. So the big thing here is understanding that these are not going to work the way you want the first time. I've never built an AI workflow that was awesome the first time. Typically, they take me a few days, and a lot of it is refining the scope behind the prompts and how we're actually communicating the goals and the output. And we're telling them, hey, I don't like this, or this was formatted wrong. And we give that full circle feedback, which is critical in building these agents. Now, when it comes to picking tools, the reason why I'm not doing a tutorial on an individual tool, and I will do a walkthrough next on an actual tool, but the tools are changing incredibly fast. What was relevant a year ago is literally basically obsolete today. So a year ago, every AI coach was teaching N8N, which was honestly very complicated. And it was more of a developer tool, and it's still worth using, but it's not the simplest thing to set up. Now you can set any of these tools up using AI by just having a conversation. So the tools that I use the most are Manus, which is a mixture of basically an AI brain and execution. It actually is owned by Meta, and they don't have their own kind of agent in sense of like they don't have a ChatGPT. Claude is actually like a brain. They don't have their own brain. They pool the best of other platforms. So it is a little bit more expensive. But if you're looking for that quick, easy start where you want to automate something right away, Manus is probably the easiest in my opinion at the moment, because you can actually just say, hey, go do research on YouTube, and it'll go build basically a connection to YouTube, scrape YouTube, give you the data, and it's really, really good. Now, the next and more powerful and honestly balance, it's more affordable when you're using a lot of tokens or you're using a lot of AI, is Claude. Now, if you're just using these as a chatbot, asking questions back and forth, cost doesn't really matter because you're not going to burn through your credits. As you start really using it more programmatically and building complicated workflows, Claude is more of that developer style tool. Now they're integrating a lot of things that Manus does that I like right now into Claude. So I'm going to say the gap's going to continue to close where Claude eventually will probably outpace based on what they're currently doing. And these will continue to change, but I'm going to show you the principles behind each one of these. Now, one of the things that probably won't change is you need a backend. So you need basically a place to store everything. This Superbase is like Excel on steroids. It basically connects all of your data points. So if you have kind of like, think of a CRM, you have all these information, it links all of it together as records and makes it really powerful. There are other what's called RAG agents that use kind of data, but typically I'm using Superbase for my backend for any kind of automation. And then there's other ones that have slightly different purposes, but especially if it's data oriented, like SEO information, marketing information, client information, Superbase is going to be currently the winner, and it's really easy to work with. And I'll show you again a real example. Then you have N8N, Zapier, and Make. They're basically different versions of the same thing, where N8N is the most advanced, Zapier is the easiest, and Make is kind of that sweet in between. But the advantage is, and I will show you in the next slide probably, it says literally, let's show you. The advantage is that you don't have to learn how to use these tools anymore, because in Claude or in Manus, you can connect the tools and just say, okay, let's build an agent using this. So I'm going to pull up Manus because that's what I'm building most of my stuff on right now. And I actually use both Manus and Claude. This is not a promotion. I do have a referral link down below for all the tools, but most of them are just a few free credits. So I'm not actually getting paid for most of these. But anyways, so when you're in here, we're going to be very speech oriented. That's why that standard operating procedure is so important. So as part of the Founder Systems course and community, I have a whole bunch of SOPs and documentations that help you get your job done, but you can also grab a lot of them for free down below. So go ahead and grab that sample and you can follow along with me. But basically we have an AI agent planning template. Now, I'm not gonna go through the template because it's gonna continue to adjust, but it's basically going through this presentation, asking you, does this actually solve a problem? What is our real constraint, current state? But we're gonna document as much as possible in here. And you can even throw this template into ChatGPT or into Claude or into Manus and say, hey, help me fill this out. Let's have a conversation back and forth, and then have it give the completed solution. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and download this. So one of the things is plain text or markdown works a lot better with AI tools because they don't have to read through formatting. So markdown is just literally the way it's formatted. It's more or less plain text. I'll show you. And you don't have to know what any of this really means, but you'll see basically markdown files a lot more because AI can read this a lot cleaner. You can paste this into Manus like that and it'll just show up, or you can add it as a file. But if you're adding it as markdown or as text, it's going to be able to read it easier. However, that's not a big deal. If you just want to put in the file, that's perfectly fine. Now, this would basically be our standard operating procedure, our instructions for the tool. We could obviously, I'm very auditory, so I would have a conversation, add more details back and forth, tell it to ask me questions. So I'd say, here's the standard operating procedure that I'm trying to implement. Ask me questions about this. I want to build this agent that's going to do it for me. Now, the next thing in here is why I said you don't really have to learn these tools is you have to connect the access that it needs. So one of the things that I use for projects is obviously GitHub, which is just where the code goes. Again, more complicated and you don't really even need it. So that's going to be a more advanced thing. But Superbase is something that I use pretty much for everything. And you get access to these just by coming in here and add connections. And then you can add things like Zapier, make, N8N is probably right here, N8N. So that's why any of these tools that you think you need to learn, you don't anymore. You just need to ask. If you don't know what tool to use, you just ask, what tools do you need connections to? And you can make custom ones, but there's so many. And I have another video that should be live already on different AI agents you can build for your business and ones that I've personally built that have helped me grow. But this is why the tutorial piece of this is really simple. It's not really how do I use the tools anymore. It's how do I think in systems. So one of the constraints in my business was I create YouTube videos, but the time it takes to create YouTube videos for me, doing the research, I had a consultant, I had a lot of help, and it was just very, very expensive and time consuming. So I'm going to show you kind of what this does super quick, but basically this is a front end tool that's all built in Manus, and I did use some Claude in here, but you can do it all in Manus. And I have a whole bunch of features in here, so it's more advanced, but basically it does research on YouTube. I get a dashboard, and then it has a planning feature, which basically tells me exactly what I'm going to film, what I'm in progress. You can see that I'm filming. This is the video I'm filming. I pulled my data from here. I have a video planner in here. And so each one of these systems is solving a constraint with helping me come up with a title and a thumbnail. I do have a private beta down below. It's a paid program. We're only letting in one person at a time. If you're interested in getting access to this tool, awesome. If not, this was not the point. But I don't even want to say how much money I was paying a consultant, but I've spent over $40,000 just on working with YouTube consultants and trying to get the right data and the right ideas. And so I got tired of spending that money. So I built this to save time and to bring in new clients, but also to stop spending money. So that's really where you want to start looking at these tools, and just to show you the power. You can build out these dashboards and you can do it all with text. And again, the reason why I like Manus is it's all kind of integrated right into the system. So you see it's built in, it's linked to, again, more advanced, the server, which if you're going to focus on the most cost-effective way, Manus would not be the solution. It'd probably be Claude and connecting more tools together. But this is the simple way where you can just have a conversation and say, hey, I want to build this. How do I do it? Now, one of the key things that separates a founder who's being successful with automation and AI and not is understanding the KPIs behind it. Now, we mentioned the 4 levers before, where it's either revenue, lifetime value, recapturing time, or reducing risk. You really want to figure out a way to track that. So if it's recapturing time, increasing revenue. So for my YouTube example, it brings in new clients, it's bringing in new revenue, but it's also recapturing a massive amount of time for me. So it was 2 screaming yeses on my side to develop a tool like that. And I spend a decent amount of time on it, but it's very, very powerful. So it's figuring out what's actually going to make that difference. Then how do you track that? So if you're just recapturing time, but your team's doesn't increase their output. So that would probably be, if you're recapturing time, your lifetime value should get better, or you should be bringing in more revenue. So when you really look at ROI behind these agents, it really comes down to the main 2 is money moving, or is our business safer than it was before? Because time is kind of like an extra piece that fits in underneath these. But as a founder and as a business owner, I'm really focused on my time. So that's why I include that, because if I can free up more time to spend with my family, spend with my friends, to travel, that is a high leverage activity for me. If you like videos like this and you want to learn more about systemizing your business, check out the Founder Systems AI course and community down below. I also have all those SOPs that I showed you for free, so you can grab that. And make sure to subscribe because I'm going to release videos on SOPs, systems, and AI agents.